new pictures just into CNN. A group of armed Trump supporters gathered outside the FBI office in Phoenix, Arizona. Photographs taken this morning showed Trump supporters carrying handguns and assault-style weapons on the street. That is allowed under Arizona's open carry law. One of the demonstrators said they're at that location to support Trump and protest what they call the unlawful search at Mar-a-Lago. This week, the FBI, along with the Department of Homeland Security, issued a joint intelligence bulletin warning of violent threats against federal law enforcement, courts, and government personnel, as well as facilities.
Following the FBI search of Mar-a-Lago, the Bureau is monitoring an unprecedented number of threats fueled by dangerous statements like these.
This is Gestapo crap, and it will not stand. The Department of Injustice needs to be cleaned out if they're going to start pretending we're some sort of banana republic.
This should scare the living daylights out of American citizens and say, we have got to change our federal government. The way our federal government has gone, it's like what we thought about the Gestapo and people like that they just go after people. What we thought about Soviet Union, what we look at Latin America, we have got to say to ourselves, this cannot be our country.
There are significant concerns today about the safety of the federal judge who reportedly signed off on the warrant to search Mar-a-Lago. Online violent rhetoric prompting a court in Florida to remove the information about the magistrate judge linked by some media outlets to that warrant. Posts on pro-Trump websites have been calling for the judge's home address to be shared online. Another focus of the threats, the FBI. The Bureau's director speaking to reporters directly addressed the safety of these agents. Listen.
I'm always concerned about violence and threats of violence against law enforcement. Any threats made against law enforcement, including the men and women of the FBI, as with any law enforcement agency, are deplorable and dangerous.
CNN's Donny O'Sullivan has been reporting on this violent rhetoric. He joins us live now. Donny, you track this stuff closely, and you read some of it is quite disturbing. Go into the details and then help me with the context. Is this louder, more threatening than prior to January 6th, or about the same?
It's very, very hard to, of course, kind of measure these things quantitatively. But what we can say is that right after news of that FBI search on Mar-a-Lago broke on Monday, we saw an immediate spike in violent rhetoric online. And if we can bring back up that website, the Southern District of Florida Court's website, up until sometime Tuesday evening, there was a profile of a judge on that site with contact details for the judge's office, clerks, etc. That had to be taken down from that website because there were so many people on these platforms calling for violence against that judge. And of course, it doesn't just relate to the judge. I want to show you some of the threatening message and the rhetoric that have been played out online. Somebody's just posted lock and load in relation to the Mar-a-Lago search, kill all feds. And somebody else saying, I'm just going to say it, Garland needs to be assassinated, simple as that.
The Department of Homeland Security and the FBI saying in a joint intelligence bulletin obtained by ABC News that there has already been an increase in threats and acts of violence, including armed encounters against law enforcement, judiciary, and government personnel in reaction to the court-authorized search.
In response to the FBI search at Mar-a-Lago, some Trump supporters have also increased calls for a civil war. Laura Barone Lopez takes a deeper look at threats of political violence by elements of the far right.
Those dangerous threats are being fueled by conspiracy theories, as well as the mistrust of the FBI and Justice Department that has been promoted by many Republican politicians. To explain the rising extremism on the right, we're joined by Barbara Walter, professor at University of California at San Diego and author of the book, How Civil Wars Start. Barbara, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
I want to ask you about the Mar-a-Lago search prompted a lot of Trump supporters to call for civil war. How does this fit into the growing pattern of extremism on the right?
So for those of us who study violent extremism here in the United States, this is not a surprise at all. If you had been on the chat rooms starting in 2008, you would have seen an increasing narrative that talked about shifting to a more violent strategy if more conventional methods of maintaining power, and by that I mean white power here in this country, didn't work. And so what we're seeing is sort of that narrative moving into the mainstream.
And yesterday, a gunman breached an FBI office in Cincinnati, Ohio, before being killed by authorities. Reports said that he appeared to be at the January 6th insurrection, and he had also previously said he wanted to attack the FBI. When you see these incidents connected to violent rhetoric, what does that say to you?
Yeah. So we know that violent extremism here in the United States has increased consistently since 2008, and it continues to increase quite dramatically. We know that much of the violence is being perpetrated by far-right groups, and we know the profile of those far-right groups. About 65% of them are white supremacist groups. About 29% of them are anti-federal government groups, and there's overlap there. But the anti-federal government groups are groups that think that the federal government is illegitimate. If they see it as legitimate, that it has too much power. And the reason they don't want the federal government to have too much power is that federal law overrides state law. And so what we're seeing is an increase in attacks on law enforcement agents and on federal government employees. And so, of course, the gunman in Cincinnati was targeting the FBI, and that's no coincidence. And I'll say one more thing, that there is a book called The Turner Diaries, and it's considered the Bible of the far right. The Turner Diaries outlines exactly how you would persecute, how you would conduct a civil war against the U.S. government. And the very first thing it says that you should do is to attack the FBI.